Chapter 443. Last stand against the tide. Part 1. Solstice, in his dragon form, took a deep breath and unleashed a torrent of sunfire that descended on the stag monsters, burning them into nothing upon contact. His golden scales glowed brightly as he soared higher and spat flames with greater intensity, while flapping his wings to keep himself steady. Godfrey drew his warbow to the limit and released the arrow. It split into 3 arrows, which were further divided into 9, then 12. As his arrows struck their targets, countless arrows from the bow archers flew out, flooding the sky with their numbers. Their numbers kept increasing as the arrows multiplied midair before raining down on the stampede. The earth trembled as the stags that were struck collapsed suddenly, causing others behind them to stumble. Almost 90,000 stag monsters died, but some still kept running with arrows stuck in their bodies, especially the 4 demigods. Isaac was still ahead, his breathing growing fainter by the minute. Behind the stampede, the rest of Isolde's dragons flew low, breathing out a tsunami of fire that ate up the numbers of the stag monsters. Isolde crept back onto Aen's back with one hand. The gleam of her draconic eyes was no different from an enraged, wounded apex predator. Her emotions fueled her dragons. Ghost dived down, picked one stag monster up by its horns and threw it into the air. He shot a lightning blast, roasting the beast. With a huge burst from his wings, he went up and tore off a huge portion as his entire body crackled with red lightning. He shot a blast that exploded, killing a few hundred. Those that died caused others to stumble on their corpses, resulting in the deaths of more stag monsters. Grace's breath left a trail of ice that looked like she was creating a wall of frozen corpses, while Luther's scales gained an ominous gleam under the glow of his flames. Because of the nature of his fire, it could be traced back to where he first breathed dragon fire, and the reason was that his fire couldn't be put out. It was the undying flame. The amount of flames that came out of his mouth was 3 times that of Aen, a 400-foot-long dragon. The rocks, Isolde thought as she looked around. Her dragons could finally perform at their best because the rocks had stopped, and even the sand tsunami in the distance had collapsed. There were not more than 50,000 stag monsters left. Had the desert given up? Godfrey knocked his bow and aimed. Ballista's Goliath grunted and fired right as Godfrey released his arrow. The Goliath's arrow flew into the sky and became a bright, exploding light. In the next moment, several massive arrows the length of spears fell, forming a wall made up of impaled corpses and huge arrows. This forced the others to scatter. Without the sand tsunami forcing them in one direction, the stags could go anywhere they wanted. They split into 3 directions, each led by a demigod. Godfrey aimed for one of these demigods but slowly lowered his bow when he noticed there was no interference from the desert at all. Had they won? He scanned the desert and saw a spot. The activity there could be ignored, but when he looked closer, his eyes widened. The sand was being stirred. It looked insignificant, but he could count over 10, and if such a... Godfrey's thoughts halted when those insignificant movements erupted into sandstorms. Instantly, a fierce storm swallowed everyone, with sand flying at a speed so high it made dents in armor and tore off the flesh of some stag monsters. They were in a grinder. And as if that wasn't enough, the wind became so fierce that his entire army found themselves in the air, being tossed around by the wind. Not even the dragons could control themselves. The wings of 2 weaker ones snapped as they tried flapping against the wicked gale. Their cries made Isolde try to send them back to her domain. When she tried twice and nothing happened, her eyes widened. "Kyla, rain!" she screamed as both dragons vanished into the storm, their cries to their mother lingering for a moment before all she could hear was the howling of the wind and the sound of sand hitting her helmet. "Isolde, don't come down," she heard Godfrey's faint voice. He must have been shouting at the top of his lungs, yet his voice could barely reach her ears. But what was happening on the ground? Her question was Godfrey's reality. He also couldn't retrieve his knights, and the sand was sinking inward, so those that fell were buried despite their struggles. Godfrey heard a loud explosion, forcing him to turn his head, and he saw stones shattering and Solstice in his dragon form falling headfirst. Solstice was struck. He was the target. Tendril wings burst out of Godfrey's back as he flew against the storm. Dirge and Tempest were able to manage this storm. Toria was struggling, but Tempest went to aid her and Mountain. Dirge, on the other hand, sacrificed her shadow wraiths to the sinking sand to make sure they kept some golden knights afloat. Some would struggle until they were eventually covered by the sand, but before then, they would be able to push the knight to another. As Godfrey flew towards Solstice, he saw Isaac. The demigod stag he rode on could still run just fine on the sand, and the sandstorm didn't affect it at all. He had retrieved Dax because a single spell from the mage would run him dry. On the other hand, Isaac couldn't hold on any longer and fell off, and the sand that was just durable began to collapse. Isaac sank quickly. Torn between two options, Godfrey almost went mad in that split moment. "I'll get him, go for your knight," Immortal Armor said, "but once I leave." "Go!" Godfrey roared. The Immortal Armor broke off his body and fell downward, while Godfrey manifested a golden armor. But the moment it appeared, sand began to dent the metal. Tendril wings crackling with all their might, Godfrey flew down. Only Solstice's tail remained. He quickly grabbed it and pulled upward. At that moment, a massive stone slammed into him, seemingly from nowhere. It smashed off his armor, forcing blood out of Godfrey's mouth. His ears rang. Boom! 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 More stones slammed into him, cracking his bones, ripping off his flesh after the armor was mangled. Yet he pulled, teeth clenched hard, eyes staring at the sky he couldn't see. From every direction, stones came, shattering upon contact. Using Tempest's self-heal, Godfrey slowly repaired his damaged body only to be hit once more. Was this how much the mana tree wanted to test humanity? How did it expect people to survive this kind of test? This was... Boom! His jaw loosened, blood dripping from his torn lips. This was heartless. The sand pulled Solstice inward while he pulled outward. Both forces reached an equilibrium, which kept Godfrey in the same place, enough for the stones to keep breaking him down, and once he was down, both him and Solstice would be buried. Two birds with one stone. How many would have died if he hadn't stepped into this dungeon? It almost felt as if he was being punished for stepping up. But even if he had not, he would still bear the burden. A collapsing world meant his future would be cut off. There was no option, none at all, and this wasn't a fair fight. One blow was enough to fatally wound a demigod. The elements themselves were fighting against him. How could he fight that? At this moment, Godfrey felt helpless. Hope slipped out of his grasp. More of his knights were sinking into the sand. Dirge had lost almost all her shadow wraiths, and they couldn't be revived like always. Everything he had worked for could be lost here, including his life, his friend, and Isolde. He couldn't imagine the pain she was going through seeing her dragons fall. All this he bore and still couldn't cry. All of a sudden, an idea came to his mind. This isn't a fair fight, so why should I play fair? With that, he activated telekinesis and will freeze, pausing the entire sandstorm. The fierce wind, the sand, the dust, the flying knights, the struggling dragons, his sinking knights, the running stag monsters. Everything paused. Will freeze couldn't do this. Telekinesis could, but it would require an exorbitant amount of mana, a decade's worth. And because of that, the skill didn't even last a second. Godfrey had just added will freeze to let it all happen quicker, and just as he thought, in an instant, everyone vanished. All his knights, Solstice, Isolde and her dragons. All of them were gone. Since he couldn't retrieve them, he simply expended the last of his mana, and the world's mana system did the rest. Without mana, all summons were to be taken back to the soul space, and that was what happened. He simply forced a greater authority to intervene, saving what was left of his crumbling forces. Godfrey dropped to the ground, no armor. Nothing, just a badly wounded man without mana to heal. One of his arms was limp. Mana ran out before it could heal. There was a sudden peace, but then Godfrey remembered Isaac. He shot to his feet and saw his friend sinking once more. Without mana, his immortal armor was also gone. With ragged breaths, Godfrey raced toward Isaac. The ground loosened the closer he got, forcing him to use more strength. At one point, he was swimming in a sea of sand just to get to his friend, who was going deeper. "Isaac!" Godfrey shouted, his eyes red. He was tired. His body screamed. Each movement caused pain, yet despite the odds, he kept going until he grabbed Isaac's collar. Then Godfrey gathered his strength and, with a loud roar, jumped off with the strength of a king tier. He flew high and landed, almost falling but steadying himself. Once more the ground began to sink, a landslide into oblivion. Godfrey saw a stag herd not far from them, but he couldn't reach them. He was unable to gather his strength. Even breathing right now was hard. As they sank, Isaac shot a web, and it latched onto one of the stag monsters. He grunted but held tight as the stag dragged them out, yet the landslide kept chasing after them until Godfrey was able to get close enough to mount the stag with Isaac. The moment they mounted the stag, the desert couldn't attack them anymore. The storm, however, grew worse, but Godfrey held strong. These stag monsters were huge, 8-foot-tall beasts, big enough to carry him and Isaac comfortably. Strangely, other stags began to run after them. The divided herd all turned. This normal-looking stag they rode was the boss all along, an unassuming female, and the other 4 were the males. No wonder its horns were smaller. These deer monsters all looked like stags, so it was hard to discern the female from the male. But all this flew out of Godfrey's head as he looked at Isaac, who was smiling. The horn of one of the demigods was still in his abdomen. "I guess we won, right?" We did," Godfrey laughed, but his eyes moistened. His lips trembled as he watched Isaac grow paler. "We're almost there. Just hang on. We're almost there." Tears pooled in Godfrey's eyes as he stared at Isaac's relaxing face. He had bled so much he couldn't bleed anymore. Peace had taken his pain. "Come on, Isaac. Isaac, please. We're almost there, please." Godfrey's entire body trembled, tears running down his face and gathering at his chin as he watched his friend's eyes lose their light. "Arg!" His scream tore through the desert. He kicked the stag monster without a shred of mercy, forcing it to go faster and faster. He kept hitting it, all semblance of reason flying out the window. He kept hitting. And hitting and hitting as tears fell from his eyes. Then the stag monster ran through the red gate. "Dad! Dad!" He screamed at the top of his lungs as he stared at the woods. Without mana, he couldn't teleport to his mother. There was no help, and so an exalted demigod, hailed as the Angel of State, broke down and wept. He wept like a child. The stag monsters he came out with surrounded him, 4 angry demigods against a monoless man. He was defenseless. But as they charged at him, space suddenly twisted like a black hole had appeared, stretching the demigods and the stag monsters like spaghetti. They died instantly, blood splattered everywhere. This made Godfrey lift his head, and he saw Percival and Lucy running toward him. The moment he laid eyes on them, strength filled his bones and he lifted Isaac. The sound of the gate being pulled up rang loudly, and then the burglary gate was pushed aside. After that, the main door was opened, and sunlight poured into the dark hall. Ronald's long shadow stretched all the way to the golden-haired man, sitting on the floor with his head buried between his legs, in the midst of a dust-covered floor and different cold weapons lying around. Ronald's footsteps echoed until he stood before Godfrey. He squatted. "It's been 2 days. I've looked for you everywhere possible. I had no idea you were in Victoria's gym. It's not even that far from home, and I've gone thousands of miles." Godfrey lifted his head and rested it on the wall. "Is he alive?" Ronald clenched his teeth. Seeing that, Godfrey's eyes moistened, and he began to laugh. "Your mother can heal many, but she can't bring back the dead. He was already dead before you brought him here. There was nothing she could do." Godfrey inhaled deeply several times, but he couldn't stop tears from rolling down his eyes. "I was there. He wouldn't have jumped into that dungeon if it wasn't because of me. It was my duty to protect HIM." Ronald shut his eyes when Godfrey screamed. Godfrey opened his mouth. His lips trembled as he struggled to speak. I failed him." "You did your best, Godfrey. What you faced is usually 10 times stronger at the same tier. It's a miracle you're alive. You would have all been buried had it not been for your efforts." Godfrey looked at his dad. "Does it matter?" His voice was soft, almost a whisper. "He's gone." His blue eyes rippled. Godfrey could almost see Isaac when he was at the mercy of bullies. He recalled their discussion after clearing a dungeon filled with ants and saving 2 girls. "I watched him die in my arms. What's the use of all I've suffered to become this strong? What's the use of bearing the title of a demigod if I just can't bring back a friend?" Ronald was silent. There are billions out there who think becoming a demigod would have stopped their own friend from dying. Over 800,000 people have died in just 1 week, son. He sat on the dust-covered floor, leaning right beside Godfrey. "There are many in your position right now. From low tiers to titled God tier, we all experience loss no differently. I can only say this. Isaac would never regret meeting you. From what I heard, you changed his life. And he died saving his friends. He reminds me of who I once was." Ronald spoke softly. Godfrey lowered his head. He stared at his fingers. Though they were just dusty, all he saw were blood-covered fingers. "His mother, does she know?" Godfrey asked, still facing the floor. "Not yet. Your mother is devastated, thinking it's her fault that you're in this state. Lucy and Percival still haven't recovered from the shock, and Isolde." That last name made Godfrey's eyes narrow. "She's in deep grief. From what I understand, her current tier created a deep bond between her and those dragons. She actually feels like their mother, and she just lost 4 of them. In addition to that, her close friend also died, and you're too broken to offer solace." Ronald sighed heavily. "I shouldn't have gone into that dungeon." "Then what? Watch as those monsters kill thousands, maybe millions of people with families. With children, parents, grandparents, bobbies." Godfrey faced his father. "At least the desert won't be there." "It's your grief talking. No one knows what you and your friends went through in that gate, and you might never receive enough praise for it, maybe none at all, but looking at you, I see a hero." Ronald smiled. "Most true heroes are rarely known. I know you are disconnected from the public. You've seen their hate, and you're doing this for yourself, but you're inspiring your friends. Isaac saw something worth dying for, and it wasn't a selfish person but his personal hero. So, just know we're all waiting for you, the master of the House of Order, to give a proper final farewell to his friend and follower. You're no longer a boy, Godfrey. You're a man. Weep, wipe your tears, and rise up." Ronald stood up. "You know where to find me." He took a few steps and stopped. "I know you don't know about this, but I had a brother once, and I became who I am because of him. As long as you breathe, let those dungeons know you're alive. In the end, it's either you or them. There is no in-between." Godfrey finally appeared at the mortuary in Paradise that night. He was the last person to step into the room. His mother, his father, Lucy, Percival, Adrian, and the captains of the sentinels like Oliver and Arden were also around. Everyone turned to him while he looked at Isaac's cold corpse, unable to utter a word. They had already agreed to inform Isaac's mother, but since she had arrived, they all left the room one after the other until only his mother was left. Godfrey did not know how to look at her. "This is just the second dungeon, and you're already in this state." Her voice made him lift his head. Her irises had vanished. She drew close and crossed her arms. "You so-called highly intelligent beings, always so selfish. Look at you cry. What are you doing? Get lost." She lifted an eyebrow. "Don't yell at your mother. You would have no business existing if I had not thought of bringing a mere thought to life." Godfrey pushed her aside. "I don't care. People die and I've allowed you to grieve, but it's becoming annoying. You're my son, my son. Set your sights on greater things. Set your sights on the next dungeon. Every moment you waste, your world crumbles." "And who caused it?" Godfrey flared, glaring hard at her. "There you go, forgetting all the good I've brought you. You brought me nothing, nothing but pain, pain." His eyes widened. "You are a disgrace to the word mother, a disgrace. Even animals protect their young, but you toss yours into a mad quest." "It's made you stronger," she retorted. "No, no, you tortured me. You made a man so obsessed over my life that he haunts my every step. You slapped my life in Isolde's face, ruining her childhood. All I've suffered can be traced back to you, my mother." He took a step back. "You didn't make me stronger. You broke me." He looked at her. This time his anger was mixed with sadness. "I know why, but why? Why would you do this to a peaceful universe? Why would you create this chase for power? You've killed more than numbers can count. We were made just like you were. Why? With or without you, it will continue. Do not see me as the villain. I am not. You don't judge the sea for drowning men who just went there to make sure they can feed their families," she replied. "You don't blame a stone because you struck your foot against it. You don't blame the sun for being too hot, nor can you blame the rain for being too severe, causing a flood that destroys everything in your house. Do you know what energy is? Cause. Maybe I'm just carrying out what I'm meant to do. To others, I'm just a tree, so they don't blame me, but you do because you're privileged. Yet with all your privilege, all you do is sulk. Your case isn't the worst." When she said that, Godfrey forced a thin smile, then turned away. He turned away from her, but then she spoke again. "Actually, Valentina's summon can bring your friend back to life. She just doesn't know how." The moment she said that, Godfrey faced her with a frown. "But life goes for life. She can loan him 10 years or more, but that same amount will be taken from hers. So Godfrey, since you hate your mother that much, why don't you make her do it?" She tilted her head. "She'll do anything you tell her. Do it, and let's see how your father handles it. His own son asking his wife to give away a good portion of her life for a friend. And funny enough, the celestial stag's lifespan is just 120 years. Such a short lifespan for a very precious creature." She looked Godfrey straight in the eye. "What will you choose? Give your friend 10 years so he can at least live until he's 28 and risk watching your 40-year-old mother suddenly become 50. The manna tree went and touched Isaac's cold forehead. "The prerequisites are simple. 1, he can't be dead for too long. 2 days is still salvageable, and his soul has to be around. Lucky for you, his soul hasn't left the soul space because of his summon. That spider is a master of soul skills. Unfortunately, those skills only work when she's dead." She looked at Godfrey. "I know you've already decided to give up 10 years of your mother's life. Just know I told you this because I don't want to watch your fall like a pack of cards. Once this ruination is over, you'll become a god king. At the monarch tier, your blood becomes ichor and no one below your tier can kill you. At the sovereign tier, you will be able to compel those weaker to do anything, even against their will, and at the tier of a god king." She smiled. "You'll be much stronger, a god king amongst gods. It also means you'll be extremely valuable dead, and others are prone to hunting you to fuel their growth. It's even more vicious than the hunt for paragons. At their tier, morality doesn't exist. She tilted her head. So, dear son, will he command me to do it for you? Will you take 10 years of your mother's life without her permission? You could take more, all of it, and I won't be here to speak to you again. It's your choice. Godfrey was silent. He turned and approached the door. Let's say you succeed, even though you don't know what I'll become at that point. Doesn't that frighten you? The manhwa tree raised an eyebrow, but then she noticed another face staring at her. A shadow clad in armor overlapped with Godfrey for a split second, but it made her frown. You know, I've figured out a way to die without you or Cain winning, and trust me, when that time comes, you'll come to fear the monster you created. He turned the door handle. It won't be far from now. It's been 2 days. His mother has a right to know. We can't keep it from her any longer, Adrian was saying when Godfrey stepped into the corridor. Everyone looked at him. Don't tell her. They all looked at themselves when he said that, but no one said anything as they watched him walk away. Percival swiftly went after him. Outside, Percival held Godfrey's shoulder. You can't deprive his mother of her right. What if she doesn't get to hear her son ever died? What if there's a way to bring him back to life? Godfrey turned. Percival took a step back. What? You think there's a way to bring him back? Most of these things work within a few minutes. A few hours is already too late, and Isaac has been there for 2 days. We have all been searching for a skill that's able to bring him back. If what you're proposing isn't necromancy, let me hear it. My mother, Godfrey took a deep breath. She can loan 10 years of her life to Isaac. The moment Godfrey said that, Percival's eyes widened. You can't seriously be thinking about that. I don't know what to think. How will your father feel? That's 10 years of her life. You'll watch her age 10 years in the span of a second. Percival exhaled. Maybe she has a long lifespan, I mean. She doesn't, Godfrey interrupted. She's already in her 40s, and she has a life expectancy of 120. She'll have 10 years less to live, and Isaac will only have 10 more years. Percival clenched his teeth hard, then turned away. Are you going to do it? I will. Godfrey replied and walked away. He knew the manhwa tree wanted to prove a point with this. She wanted him to make a sacrifice that would haunt him and kill the cards he used to brand her as cruel. To think, once upon a time, his goal was to protect his mother and ensure her prestige at all costs. Godfrey, how far have you fallen? He said internally. My 16-year-old self would have haunted me even if he was several times weaker. Don't I have that fight in me anymore? Godfrey chuckled. There was a soft voice inside, encouraging him, telling him it wasn't over. It was almost perplexing how a part of him feels condemned, and another still said there were more battles to fight. That King Godfrey can't be condemned. Throughout the night, Godfrey pondered until he slept off. His eyes snapped open the next morning when the sound of someone opening the gym echoed through the empty hall. Sunlight poured through as the door was opened wide. Godfrey almost frowned until his eyes adjusted, allowing him to see the individual pushing the door. Godfrey blinked. Was he dreaming? Isaac folded his arms and chuckled. I came back from the dead. He nodded smugly, then approached Godfrey with wide strides. Isaac. Shocked, Isaac beamed, then stretched his hand toward him. I think it's time you stand up, Master Godfrey. Everyone said you've not been yourself for the past 2 days. You're stronger than this. Godfrey grabbed his hand. I thought I was. He rose to his feet and held Isaac's shoulders. How is this possible? I think you should ask your mother. The moment Isaac said that, Godfrey's expression changed. He flashed out of the gym but froze in his tracks. His parents' house was a good distance away, but he could tell that the hill within his view was clearly where his parents' house once was. He tried activating teleportation, but it didn't work, meaning the location did not exist. What happened? Godfrey turned to Isaac. I think you should see it for yourself." When Godfrey got there, he couldn't believe his eyes. Almost half the homes in this residential district were completely gone. In their place were carpet grass, colorful shrubs and trees. From the hill he saw came a waterfall, splashing into a thin brook, then running through stone-guided paths. Paradise policemen were already around the area and had set up a blockade because of the staggering number of people. Some had bottles and nylons with glowing blue water and were struggling to make their way out while protecting their water from others. It was chaos out here. At the top of the hill sat a white stag with soothing deep blue eyes and some blue glowing spots on its branching horns. White didn't just look divine, it felt like a divine entity. Its size was much bigger, its horns could dwarf a bungalow. Godfrey was confused. It felt like he slept and woke up in a new world. White had formed a small ecosystem where healing was as easy as breathing air. With a thought, Godfrey teleported and appeared on the hilltop. He felt a little drained after doing that. The mana he had left wasn't much, and the hill was a good distance away from where he stood, which was behind the thick crowd. The moment he appeared at the hilltop, he saw his parents. Brown, his father's bear, moved around the vast hilltop, growling, while White brought his head close to Godfrey. He caressed the stag's head, then approached his parents, who stood there as if waiting for him all this while. "I told you there wasn't a need for a meeting. He'll come running as fast as his legs could take him when he sees the results." Ronald chuckled softly. How did all of this happen, and how is your friend alive?" Valentina pursed her lips. "I gave away 10 years of White's life." Godfrey frowned. What? Nothing made sense. Valentina should have no idea about his discussion with the mana tree, and wasn't it supposed to be his mother's life? Wait. A life for a life. White was part of Valentina, and White was the actual healer, not his mother. The mana tree knew what it was doing. It was White all along, but he didn't think that way because, unlike most summoners, he had a lot of skills and could fight like a demigod, so he unknowingly thought of himself as less of a summoner. "It seems you didn't think too deeply when I told you I am the successor of the Golden Fate Weaver. I see the fates of what I consider treasures, meaning I see your golden fate, the same for your mother," Ronald said. Godfrey stared at him. "Then you knew that Isaac would die, yes. That you would be faced with an option to exchange a portion of your mother's life to bring your friend back to life. Yes. That's why I have the word fate in my title." Ronald's reveal made Godfrey turn to his mother. "Then you know about the mana tree." Ronald smiled softly, "Even before I returned." Seeing Godfrey stare at Valentina, Ronald shook his head. "There's no need. She won't recall a word. The mana tree puts a limit so she never knows what she truly is." Ronald waved his hand before her eyes, but it didn't move. She just stood there as if frozen in time. "Why didn't you tell me?" Godfrey asked. "Because you wouldn't tell me. Although I have close ties with fate, my fate leans more towards weaving positive ends. Good endings. Weaving fate means changing it. I just weave two separate things to make one. If White gives up 10 years, it brings Isaac back to life, and it also exceeds 40, and once it crosses that age, it's able to form a home." Ronald stretched out his hand. "This place, with a continuous stream of water bearing one of the best healing capabilities in the world. Although it can only heal physical wounds and is becoming better after detoxification, it can handle over 80% of injured persons around the globe." Ronald approached Godfrey. "This is the ruination. A single bottle can change the fate of a family. I spoke to your mother and you know how she is. Her only pain is White, but White was also willing to make the sacrifice. This is all they are good at, saving lives." Ronald held Godfrey's shoulder. "We're not completely useless in the grand scheme of things. Neither are we going to let our son bear all the weight. I might be a man living without fate, and a part of your mother might be the cause of everything, but we still love you, and we'll still make sacrifices for our son." White nudged Godfrey from behind, and Godfrey heard his mother's gentle laughter. "You do know that White is your guardian too." She came close and embraced her son. 10 years is nothing. Even people we displaced from their homes are scrambling to earn our favor," she chuckled. "I don't think we'll be able to live in silence after what White just did." "It made paradise a true paradise," Ronald said, then tilted his head. Clad in a red gown, Elder Inara walked into the council hall with elegant yet wide strides that stretched the fabric of her attire. John and Orion stood before their chairs, about to sit, only to be interrupted by her arrival. "Did you see what sits in Mainstream District?" Inara's light voice echoed in the hall as she got to the table, placed her 10 fingers on it, and leaned down. "I couldn't believe my eyes," Orion's thick voice boomed. Inara faced John. A mini oasis formed out of thin air in the middle of Mainstream District, a strictly residential area where a lot of those high-class summoners, who are quite stuck up because of their fairies and elven summons. She paused, her eyes wide in disbelief. Yet there was not one complaint. "I mean, I couldn't believe it until I saw what had happened with my own eyes. Isn't that the mother of the young man whose summon isn't alive?" She sat down. "It is, being exceptional runs in the family," Orion replied. "They say there's a seemingly endless brook of water able to restore lost limbs and even heal those near death." John's deep, calm voice rang. "From what I've also heard, that might not be far from the truth. She does have the best summon in the healing category here in Paradise. Not even fairies or elven healers can match her summon skill, but on a scale this large it seems impossible." "You've not dug deep enough then. I heard it only works if you take permission from the dear God." Inara and John raised an eyebrow. "The dear God," they chorused. "Valentina's summon, it's a male deer. With its permission, the water you collect retains its potency. Without it, it's just water," Orion replied. "You have quite good in-depth knowledge. Didn't this just happen last night? It seems you've already been there," Inara probed. John glanced at Orion and exhaled softly. "We shall verify this news, but if it happens to be as we have heard, what shall we do about it?" "What do you have in mind?" Inara leaned back, staring at John. "I say we increase the number of elders governing Paradise. Valentina fits all criteria, even better than us when we started. Her hill sanctuary can heal almost any physical injury. With her permission, that water can be bottled and taken around, mainly for raids. She also has a talented son who is slowly drifting away from Paradise and a husband who, in the few times he revealed his strength, has proven to be a demigod." John crossed his arms. "This is a powerful and influential family that should be tied to the system. Paradise is bound to benefit immensely." He took a light breath. "Do you agree with this notion?" "I don't see the problem with it. I don't see how it clashes with my objectives, ideals, or gains. In fact, it opens and fills a new spot that none of us can fill," Inara responded. Orion nodded, then caressed his beard. "But her husband and her son have good futures in this new age. It would mean Valentina's power as an elder would be immense. The Hill Sanctuary alone has made her no less than a messiah to the Sentinels, which are the most powerful force in Paradise. Your concerns are not unfounded, but the pros outweigh the cons, and should they arise, we have the Watchmen to balance the scales. For now, we benefit, the people benefit, and in the future, we might be a deciding factor in the world." John looked at Inara and Orion. "We agree," both of them said. "We shall inform her. I also believe her appointment should be set on a new day, which should be dedicated to her. What should we call it?" Inara pursed her lips while slowly tapping her sharp chin. "We've never really had a day dedicated to the formation of Paradise. How about we use what she has done as a means to activate a day we would call Paradise Day? It would be to celebrate the day Paradise came into being, and the Hill Sanctuary perfecting it." On the hill, Godfrey squatted close to the cliff. The peace this scenery brought to him acted like a soothing balm to a wound in his heart. Peace returned to him, and his mind opened up. Right now, Godfrey knew all that was left was to wait for Isolde. She was the only piece left, and even if he tried explaining, no one could really feel how much he missed her. He wanted to hold her, to embrace her, but he knew Godfrey before today didn't have that capacity. His mentality, however, had toughened up. White sat right next to him while Brown lay down, half moaning, half growling. Godfrey couldn't tell if it was hungry or if this was just a habit. Eventually, he got tired of squatting and sat on the ground, leaning on White. Godfrey. A sweet, high-pitched voice made him tilt his head to the slope, where he sighted Percival and Isaac behind Lucy. Her twin ponytails dangled as she walked. Godfrey smiled. Although they met 2 days ago, it felt like this was when they were officially meeting once again. "You look much better now," Lucy beamed when they came close. Godfrey blinked. "I saw what you did." He tilted his head toward Percival, then his eyes went back to her. "How did that come about?" Lucy glanced at Percival, whose hands were inside his pockets. "Cain gave her a summon," Isaac ranted out. "Isaac?" Lucy glared at him, avoided Godfrey's eyes and tugged Percival's sleeve, forcing him to speak up. Percival sat on the ground beside White. "Gabriel might have discovered we know something about him. He gave Lucy an obsidian, which nearly drove her crazy, but we met a demigod that gave her another summon before sacrificing himself. They are a thing now." Isaac placed both hands beside his mouth as he silently threw out these words to Godfrey. Unfortunately, Godfrey wasn't having any of that after what he just heard. "I'm sorry, Lucy." She pursed her lips. "I had someone from the group. That was more than enough care." Godfrey nodded. "You're a dual summoner now. That's excellent news, but I will be watchful about this summon Cain created. Now, that aside, what exactly does Gabriel think we know?" Percival and Lucy shook their heads. "We're uncertain." "Uncertain about what?" Space ripped open and Gabriel stepped out. He wore a soft smile, and his eyes settled on Lucy first. But when she didn't even flinch and instead radiated unshakable confidence, his eyes slowly narrowed. "Fascinating. The world truly is vast. I definitely did not see this outcome. Neither did I predict White having this kind of ability. Well, there will be things I can't predict, that's for sure, but my, oh my, these two are surprising." "Gabriel?" Ronald called out, and Gabriel turned. He saw Ronald and Valentina attending to some well-respected individuals in society. Seeing Ronald beckoning for him to come over, he took a step in that direction, then paused, tilting his head to gaze at the small group once more. There was something in their gaze, barely hidden for that matter. It was defiance, especially from Lucy and Isaac. In Percival's eyes was rage swirling behind the calm front, while Godfrey, his to-be general, stared at him deeply. But in those eyes he saw no readable emotion. The corners of Gabriel's lips curled up a bit. From what he could interpret, Godfrey had made up his mind. His emotions couldn't be seen anymore because they had sunk deep enough to become a part of his being. "He wants to kill me." Gabriel chuckled. With a light smile, he left them, heading for Ronald and the other older adults. "He's wiser. They must think I have something to do with Cain, and beyond doubt, a younger Godfrey would have pounced on me." His smile widened. "He's growing up just nicely. I'm creating something dangerous." His eyes shone with exhilaration. "I actually feel threatened. This is exciting. When our clash comes, I won't fight you anymore. But you shall face Sebastian, and it will be surprising when you discover how abominable your headmaster truly is. I trust you also have your secret card, or I shall teach you in the most painful way possible. We can kill him. Lucy is our evidence. No one will stand against us." Isaac turned to the others and said softly when Gabriel was far away, "I see 4 demigods with over twice the number of demigods. Even if he's a monarch tier, there's a possibility we can defeat him, especially with Mia's skills. It can counter his spatial tier," Lucy added. "It won't be possible." Godfrey shook his head with a soft sigh. "Why?" Percival stared at him. "Because monarchs do not have blood, it's ichor. And because of that, they can't be killed by beings that aren't true gods. That aside, I think he's most likely a sovereign, quickly rising to the God-King tier. Cain has hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of clones. I've been thinking, what if they strengthen him? It could be why he grows stronger faster than anyone or anything I've ever known," Godfrey stated. He tapped his fingers against the floor. "I think his summon is like Isolde. She grows rapidly from battles. That growth is so substantial that she can grow without relying on mana cores. Maybe Cain grows from crafting clones, and he does that without end. Maybe all three heads also have a way of increasing their points, which goes to one source, making their growth much faster." "He's absurd," Isaac frowned. "Well, if you look at it from a perspective, he's not. He's just a means to an end like the rest of us. We are racing towards one objective, even if we don't want to participate." After Godfrey said that, Lucy bit her lip. "We have to even the odds. I recovered 5 mana cores from the red gate you guys cleared. Percival and I did nothing, so don't think about sharing them with us." Percival agreed with a nod. "I don't want them either. I think I'll petition the elders to allow me to devour the memories of prisoners on death row. I grow better that way. Who knows, I might end up as an executioner. Fits my summoner personality quite nicely." Isaac crossed his arms. "I'm still giving you one," Godfrey scowled. "I won't take it. I have an alternate way of getting stronger and much faster. Tears don't affect my gain, so I can be the most powerful person in the world if I just keep absorbing memories without a care, but that will just make me worse than Cain." Isaac paused. "All I'm trying to say is, I don't need those cores." "You think I'll become a monarch if I absorb all these cores, don't you?" Godfrey looked at all of them. "That won't be possible. If I absorb these 5 cores, I'll still need one more. And that aside, you all forget that once the ruination is over, your gains will determine your next rank. Many people will rise. If you don't, you'd have to bow your head or become a source of strength for others. We did not say you're going to have all the cores, just these ones. Speak with Isolde. Once she agrees, they're all yours." Percival patted his shoulder. Isolde strolled on the shores of a sea. She bound her red hair in a high ponytail, yet it cascaded down to the slender curve of her waist, fluttering as the cold wind from the sea blew. The white gown she wore also fluttered, as her bare feet sank into the wet sand, leaving footprints that could be tracked several hundred meters back. Her upturned eyes, once alluring and sharp, now had this grieving softness. Dragons flew above the sea, their distant roars carried by the wind, echoing like cries wounding her ears. But her face remained placid. She kept walking until she arrived at a huge cavern mouth. The soft cries of little dragons drew her in. Her fragile porcelain feet left the wet sand and stepped on the hot, rocky ground. Yet that scalding temperature just felt a little warm to her. Isolde walked in, and a massive cavern graced her eyes. A huge dragon lay within it, and 4 small dragons that had just hatched waddled around their sleeping mother. The moment Isolde took another step, the dragon's eyes snapped open and she quickly rose to her feet, baring her enormous fangs. She paused, then retreated while lowering her head. "You just came." "I did," the dragon's voice rang in her mind. Isolde squatted, staring at the 4 dragons that gathered before her, all staring at her with large, innocent eyes. Isolde smiled, then caressed their heads and stubby little horns. These tiny ones were nothing like the massive behemoths that were always at her side, but those behemoths were once like this. "What is your name?" Isolde tilted her head toward the mother and asked in a gentle tone. "I have none, but the orcs they called me Morning Ash." "You were born in their world?" "Yes." I'll call you Elia. Welcome to my world, Elia." When the four baby dragons bared their fangs and flapped their wings, Isolde found herself chuckling. "And you four, of course you're welcome. This is an oasis for our kind." Her sweet smile brightened her face. Meanwhile, in the hall of his castle, Godfrey sat on the floor, leaning on the armrest of the throne. He rested one arm on his knee and placed the other on his forehead, pondering. What could she be doing? Seconds trickled into minutes. It was torturous to just sit here thinking and thinking. He understood a bit of what Isolde was going through, but didn't know if his solace was going to work. He lost 23,000 wraiths and 9,000 Golden Order knights. That was the biggest loss he had ever faced. Thousands fought to preserve others, especially the noble knights. Those taken couldn't return, and just like that, Dirge's ever-growing touty wraiths were gone. All she had left were about 7,000 touty wraiths and the Eastern Dragon. The other two commanders couldn't make it out of the desert. Had he known earlier, he would have done everything he could to exhaust his mana. "Hey, Castle, aren't you my actual summon?" Godfrey asked randomly. "I thought you could talk," Godfrey sighed, rubbing his forehead. He closed his eyes, subconsciously monitoring how mana flowed within the castle. This mana came from his physical body. He could feel his core absorbing mana and some of it trickling into his soul space. Time slowly passed, and Godfrey thought he fell asleep in his soul space. Then a subtle golden light flashed. Like he stood beneath a massive plane. That light grew bigger and brighter, like the sun came closer and closer. When he opened his eyes, Godfrey found himself lying on a grass field, staring at a vast blue sky with floating white clouds. It was captivating, especially because of the faint silhouettes of winged creatures. Squinting, he discovered those creatures were actually dragons. "It can't be." Godfrey rose to his feet. His eyes grew wider as he looked around. It looked like he had stepped into a fairyland. Hills and mountains decorated the horizons, while the sea spread out in a V shape, growing wider and wider the more it stretched toward the horizon. He could see some creatures. Some were like rhinos from Earth, but 2 times bigger, some 3 times as big. Godfrey was almost inconsequential before these creatures, and although he wasn't that far away from them, none cared about him as much as they cared about their food, which was grass. He walked through the midst of these creatures, looking around in disbelief, but it became even more shocking when he saw a vast herd of sheep that almost turned a hill white. Some were crazily massive, some were small. They all scattered when a group of dragons flew above them, but that didn't save the unfortunate few that ended up in the maws and claws of the dragons that came out to hunt. Godfrey just kept walking until he got to an area where the grasses were taller than him. Could he be in Isolde's domain? Was that even possible? His guess was that this had to be the castle's doing. Could it hear him? Godfrey ran his fingers through the tall grass. This place filled him with awe. After an enjoyable walk, he found himself at the peak of a green hill, just after the tall grasses, and from there he laid eyes on a vast plain. On this plain were trees with white leaves and white trunks. Snow had decorated the hills around this plain, and a faint mist engulfed this white forest. Turning to the north, he saw that the clouds were no longer white but black. It was because of the volcanoes that populated that region. They were quite far away, but its effect could be seen miles away. All of a sudden, 2 dragons began to circle him. "I can't really fight them, so do I have to run or—" He tried summoning Solstice, but the summoning diagram refused to appear. "Run it is." This made him laugh. Godfrey knew these dragons were not a threat to him, but they stopped their descent and flew away, making Godfrey turn, looking for what made them flee. He found a massive white hornless dragon walking out of the forest. Although they were still far from each other, Grace's size made up for it. Godfrey still remembered when this huge dragon was a wyvern flying around a building when they were first introduced. All it took were a few flaps of her wings, and Grace descended before Godfrey. The fierce gale generated by her wings forced his hair to whip about helplessly. She looked down on him, while he bent his neck in order to stare at her face. "You've grown larger now," Godfrey said after thinking for a while. Grace scowled. "I know what you're thinking, but she didn't bring me here. I'm actually here in search of her." Godfrey was certain that wasn't what Grace was thinking about, but when he said that, her eyes softened. "Do you know where she is?" "At the shore." For the first time, Godfrey heard Grace's voice in his head. It sounded like a woman speaking to him. Even after everything he'd been through and seen, hearing Grace's voice in his head felt surreal. He never imagined it that way. "Your voice sounds nice." Grace scoffed, turned, and gently flicked her tail at the spot beside him. Then she took a few steps and flew away. Godfrey watched her for a while, then went toward the shore. It took a long time of walking, but he eventually got to the shore. His eyes narrowed when he saw footprints. He followed their trail until he got to the spot where the water washing up on the shore had erased them. "Did Grace direct me to the wrong place? I feel like I'm walking into a volcano. I knew she didn't like me." Tusk. Godfrey was about to turn, but he had reached the end of the entrance, and his eyes adjusted to the huge cavern. Then they settled on the red-haired, pretty-looking damsel sitting on the hard floor and caressing 3 baby dragons, while one perched on her shoulder, nibbling at her hair. Her charming eyes fell on him at that same moment. Isolde was in disbelief when she heard that voice, but seeing him standing there, they both looked at each other in shock. And then Godfrey exhaled, his shoulders relaxing like a man who had searched for a long time and finally found what he sought. Elia rose to her feet, her size even greater than Grace's, but when she noticed the way Isolde and Godfrey looked at each other, she slowly sat back down. "Frey," Isolde's eyes trembled as she dropped the baby dragons and rose to her feet. Godfrey simply smiled. He couldn't figure out what to say, so he slowly opened his arms. Isolde bit her trembling lower lip as her eyes moistened. When she couldn't hold it anymore, she ran and jumped into his arms. He held her tight, his voice soft and comforting. "I've got you, Iso, I've got you." Tears began to stream down Isolde's eyes. She thought she had healed, that her tears had dried up, but why did she feel so broken right now? "I'm sorry." Godfrey spoke once more while he caressed her back gently. Almost no one except her parents had ever seen this fragile part of Isolde. All the outside world could see was a beauty sitting in one of the most powerful positions in the nation and beyond. It could never cross their minds that even this high and mighty young woman could still cry. He swooped her off her feet, nodded at Elia, then turned and walked away while Isolde buried her head in his chest. When Godfrey came out, the cool breeze from the sea washed over him. It felt refreshing, like all his burdens were blown away, so with his wife in his arms, he began to walk along the shore. Behind, Isolde whispered, causing him to pause and turn. Godfrey's eyes went wide. Then a smile broke out as he saw the baby dragons waddling after him. He almost laughed as they swung their wings and struggled to spit fire, but only released smoke. Godfrey went on one knee, and Isolde left his embrace, reaching out for the baby dragons. "They just came," she said to Godfrey in a soft tone, like one recovering from grief. Looking at her face, Godfrey smiled. He remembered what Arthur said, to let the pain end with him. At first, it seemed torturous, but now he understood it was because those people who weren't in that pain would be able to bring healing. What Arthur told him wasn't a burden but a remedy, a solution. And that's what he was going to be for Isolde. Now, when she couldn't smile, he would. He reached out for the last dragon struggling to join the others who were fighting for a spot in Isolde's arms. But when the last baby dragon saw Godfrey's hand, it flared up and chomped down. Godfrey swiftly pulled his hand back with reflexes exceeding those of a cat, forcing Isolde, who watched it all happen, to laugh. Her pearly laughter made Godfrey chase after the baby dragon. It cried out, running away from his reach while trying to get to Isolde, so both of them kept scrambling around Isolde. The other three cried out several times, but when they saw their brother was about to be captured, they left Isolde's embrace, flapping their wings. Their flight was pathetic. However, two were able to land on Godfrey. They launched their attacks, biting and ripping his clothes almost immediately, while the third unleashed black smoke on Godfrey's feet. It was as hilarious as it was annoying. At one point, Godfrey forgot he was doing all this to make Isolde happy and began to wonder if there was something wrong with him. What was there not to like about him? He was Isolde's husband, for God's sake. If they didn't like him, they couldn't have his wife either. Unfortunately for Godfrey, his reasoning couldn't work here. So he ended up with a blackened face, scattered hair, torn clothes, and no baby dragon in the end. Seeing Isolde with all four dragons, which were still screeching at him, Godfrey couldn't find joy from her glossy cheeks and ringing laughter. "Why are you laughing?" he grunted in frustration. It only made Isolde laugh more, to the extent she was almost tearing up. Then he blinked. Wait, it actually worked. Everything seemed to slow down at that moment of realization as he stared at her enchanting face. Wow, it really worked. His eyes went to the baby dragons. Who knew these intruders would help him so much? That thick tension he didn't know how to break was already gone, like it didn't exist in the first place. All of a sudden, Godfrey was running toward the sea. "Where are you going?" Isolde yelled, while the baby dragons turned, also confused. Had the weird man gone mad? Godfrey jumped into the sea and came out a few moments later with two fish. He went to a rock a few dozen meters away. While Isolde approached, Godfrey suspended them with telekinesis and roasted them. He cleared his throat and dropped them. The baby dragons eyed him, but couldn't resist the urge. A few seconds later, even the fish skeletons were devoured, and they were all staring at Godfrey as if they were expecting him to magically pull out another fish. Though reluctant, Godfrey went back and brought more. When he came back the third time, there were two more young dragons, much bigger than the baby dragons, but nothing compared to the adults. Godfrey glared at Isolde, who pressed her lips together and looked away like she was actually looking at something. When she noticed Godfrey wouldn't stop staring, Isolde came clean. "They want the fish, but they're afraid of the sea." Godfrey scoffed but went back. This time around, he used telekinesis and propelled himself and a massive fish to the shore, only to discover the number of dragons had increased. "I so." Isolde waved her hands frantically while struggling to contain her laughter. "I didn't call these ones, I swear. Dragons can communicate amongst themselves, and they can also hear what we say, so they know you're going to feed them." She winced. "Then we're doing it together." He moved with large strides toward her, while the dragons clamored for the huge fish. Even the baby dragons were fighting for a small chunk. A bigger, merciful dragon threw their way, while the bigger dragons blew flames at each other, some grabbing a chunk and flying only to be attacked. Godfrey closed in on his wife. He grabbed her wrist. Isolde held his chin with her other hand, and her soft lips met his own. For a moment, the cries of dragons, the crash of waves, and the chaos around them faded into the background. Both Godfrey and Isolde sat on the sand, staring at the orange light from the setting sun bleeding into the clouds and reflecting off the sea. The other dragons had gone after working Godfrey until he was panting for breath, but at least he bought the friendship of the next generation. The older dragons were masters of hunting, and according to Isolde, most of them had mountain caves filled with gold, so he had nothing interesting to offer them. "This place was once a barren land. It sounds unbelievable," Godfrey muttered. Isolde smirked proudly. He glanced at her from the corner of his eyes. You're more beautiful, Iso. Isolde felt her cheeks heat up. She batted her long eyelashes several times, shook her head from side to side, then bit her lower lip and looked away. Godfrey laughed and laid down on the sand, supporting his head with both hands behind it. I haven't felt this relieved for a long time. We should probably spend our vacations here. Isolde crept close and laid beside him. Godfrey's eyes went to her. He tried to breathe and control himself, but it just didn't work. The scent of the sea mixed with the faint warmth of her body. Godfrey swallowed. Before his rational self could realize what was going on, he grabbed Isolde and turned her so she would be atop him. It shouldn't have been comfortable, but it was Isolde. Little discomfort be damned, especially when his hand slowly crept around her waist. That curve always drove his mind crazy. Slowly tightening his grip, he pressed her closer to him and then closed his eyes like he was about to sleep. Isolde chuckled. Godfrey opened one eye. What? You might be able to pretend, but there's always an honest part of every man. Godfrey glared at her, then snapped, "Get off me." He tried pushing her off, but Isolde resisted. "You shouldn't be ashamed of being honest," she quipped. I can help you." "If you wanted to help, you wouldn't have been teasing me. I don't want your help anymore," he grunted. "Stop acting like a child," Isolde clicked her tongue. Godfrey glared at her. From afar, Elia watched the couple on top of each other, tilting from side to side. It could cause some kind of misunderstanding, but hearing their banter, Elia couldn't understand what exactly was going on there. I can't breathe, get off." "Are you trying to say I weigh a lot?" "I never said that." "You just did." At this point, Elia took her head back into the cavern. They should just be honest. She shook her head. The sun finally vanished. The sky became dark blue, with a crescent moon hanging above the sparse clouds. He could only count 3 stars, yet the sky was still beautiful. Godfrey strolled along the shore with Isolde. The water that came onto the land would cover their legs and retreat. "I forgot to tell you about Isaac. He's alive." When Isolde heard that, her tensed shoulders relaxed. "I never expected that dungeon to be that hard," he confessed. "At least we saved people. I find solace in knowing it wasn't all for nothing," Isolde replied. Godfrey was silent for a moment, then looked at the sky. "There are more dungeons, Iso. Many more, it just never ends. Then we'll keep fighting, even if it means we'll fight until the day we die." Godfrey stopped walking. "Is that the kind of life you want to live?" Isolde faced him. "It's what we must do. If we don't, our world will become ruins. If that happens, our progress stalls and our enemies rip us apart. There are people willing to do the worst to me and you. Keeping up with the race is what keeps us safe." She held the eternity band around her finger, slowly turning it. "It feels heavy." Godfrey looked at the soft blue waves. "Even in those moments, there are times like these, like the two of us, side by side. You know, this eternity band means both of us will always be together, and we'll both get to the peak of the true ancient tier." Isolde took 2 steps, closing the gap between them. Their eyes met. "When it gets tougher, promise you won't leave me, that you'll always come back." Godfrey nodded. "I will." Isolde smiled, then drew circles on his chest with the claw of her index finger. "I look forward to becoming a god with you by my side. Godfrey, my golden knight." Godfrey chuckled, his eyes closed. "Are you blushing?" Isolde teased. "Tusk, where did you see that?" "Your cheeks are flushed." Isolde pointed at his cheek with a cute pout. "That's not possible." He said that, then blinked in genuine confusion, looking behind Isolde. Curious about what caused the change in his expression, Isolde turned, but there was nothing there. All of a sudden, Godfrey held her chin, turned her face back toward him, drew close, and sealed her lips in a slow, passionate kiss. The sea splashed against them, wave after wave, but he held her waist with his other hand while her arms clung to his neck for support. Not even the power of the waves was enough to separate them. And so the crescent moon and 3 stars watched 2 demigods, a dragon and her knight, reunited under their gentle light and the crashing waves of the sea. In the end, Godfrey held her hand. "Let's go." As they walked away from the shore, he spoke. "You look like an Asian with your hair packed like that." "You think so?" Isolde smiled brightly. "It looks sophisticated. Where did you get it?" "From Nyx's cave. There are a lot of treasures I don't even know about in their caves. Do you want one?" "I don't have long hair, Ice." "It doesn't have to be for your hair." She clicked her tongue. "I'll forgive you because you're improving at being romantic or else." "Ah," Godfrey groaned. Eventually, both of them, hands entwined, vanished from the dragon domain. In a building in the bustling city of Tokyo, Japan, a group of individuals in executive suits cleared their throats and adjusted their postures at the sound of sharp footsteps. They drew closer and closer until the door was opened by the assistant of Mrs. Fukushima, and she walked in. Mrs. Fukushima laid eyes on the table in the room, and the man seated on one side of it with 2 other individuals, a female and a male. On the other hand, the man seated in the middle rose to his feet first, then the other 2 followed. "It's a pleasure to meet you once again, Mrs. Fukushima." Haruto shook hands with Mrs. Fukushima before they all went to their seats. Sitting before the most powerful woman in the country was certainly much different from sitting to discuss with the Prime Minister. The heads had greater national and international power without looking like they did. "You called for a meeting. What is the problem?" Mrs. Fukushima tilted her head. Haruto cleared his throat. "It's about the gate that appeared in the heart of Tokyo. The House of Order spoke about it, about the plague it could bring. We know that they've cleared the gate they spoke about in Scotland." "What are you suggesting, Haruto? That we bring external forces to aid us? Does Japan need aid?" Mrs. Fukushima's tone was sharp. The minister pursed his lips. "All we know is that they went into the gate and came out. Did you see what they fought in Scotland? That young man called Godfrey is an international fraud. I have no doubt of his strength, but that doesn't make him any less of a fraud. He wants to go around ripping hundreds of millions or even 1 billion from different nations. Have you ever thought, what can he fund with that?" "Mrs. Fukushima, the House of Order has strength. Godfrey is renowned as the king of summoners. No one has gotten such a title in 100 years, and his partner is called the Mother of Dragons. Both of them alone are worth 12 demigods. Losing 1 billion or more is worth saving our citizens." Mrs. Fukushima took a deep breath when she heard that. "You must be quite brave to speak so foolishly before me. Do you think I want the citizens of Japan to suffer? There are countless red gates within our country, and we have mobilized our forces to deal with them. We are also handling threats in other countries without the means to defend themselves. Do you think it's that gate, which is even smaller than the others and has a much weaker tier, that will bring ruin?" Haruto responded softly. "What if what he said is true? Shouldn't we set up a force to ensure that doesn't happen? We're already stretched thin." "We're not. I've sent our most talented summoner to deal with it." Haruto looked at his subordinates when he heard that. "Our most talented summoner." Mrs. Fukushima smirked. She knocked on the table and her assistant walked in. The assistant handed a file to the minister. As he opened it, Mrs. Fukushima began to speak. "His father served this country well, and he also has a patriotic spirit. He just awakened a summon some months ago, making him one of this new age's talents. I call him the Godfrey Daniels of the Age of Gods." She smirked. 92% symbiosis. This is the most absurd mutation I've seen." The minister struggled to retain his cool. "It's record-breaking." Mrs. Fukushima smirked proudly. "Although there are side effects to that, his summon is what we call a perfect pair of a humanoid and a beast. both powerful and yet working together in wonderful harmony. Mrs. Fukushima crossed one leg over the other and folded her arms. "Ken Asahi," Haruto murmured. What he saw documented here was amazing. They had quite a few demigods, but this young man was under the radar all this while. He could see that this young man would definitely be one of the few to decide this era. "I've sent him to the dungeon with a good team as support. He has 60 experienced and well-prepared summoners. All we have to do is sit back and expect their return with the core of the dungeon boss." Hearing what Mrs. Fukushima said, Haruto found himself nodding. With what he saw here, she wasn't really wrong. "Don't forget we are trying to acquire as many cores as we can. Once this barrier lifts, those who rise to the peak will rule. So when you think about handing over a dungeon with demigod cores to the House of Order, simply know that you're making a questionable young man powerful enough to destroy you in the end." A massive camp was set up in the midst of a forest with trees that had orange and white leaves. The ground was covered with fallen leaves, making the place look quite mesmerizing. However, the birds had fled because of the armored trucks parked everywhere, and the many agents dressed like soldiers heading to war. All of them had guns able to bring down saints and divines, making them one of the most elite forces in the country. While many of them prepared their tents as the sun was about to set, their leaders stood in a circle. There was a long, eye-catching sniper rifle strapped to a bald man's back. It looked rugged and different from any contemporary modern weapon. No one knew where he got a weapon like that, but it looked like it was made of black dragon scales, with a rune-crested muzzle, and emitted a chilling mist. "Takeshi, shouldn't you have left that rifle in the truck? You've attracted a lot of eyes." Ikiro, a shadow-bearded man, glanced at a woman who was speaking with her comrade while looking at the rifle. Takeshi scoffed. "Let them look. This god-killer prototype is the future, not one summoner deemed as some savior." Hinata, a woman with bangs and a huge antelope-like beast with massive horns, hind legs that seemed borrowed from a grasshopper, and a long tail with hardened feathers on one side, frowned. "Takeshi, that weapon was built by special summons, most especially dwarf summons. In the end, the future is still reliant on summons since that weapon can't be mass-produced." "Tisk," Takeshi clicked his tongue. "It can still kill a progenitor and even a titled god. I bet this stuff can also kill a monarch." Ikiro almost face-palmed. "You'll need a monarch tier core to power it for that kind of attack, and no one on this planet has that. You also need to lay low. You've been too loud ever since you got that gun. Be more like Ken." The moment Ikiro said that, Takeshi turned to the young man seated on a tree branch, leaning against the trunk with a book and a pen. Takeshi spat and walked away. On a tree branch sat a man who wore layered black lamellar armor bound with crimson cords, the lacquered plates overlapping from his shoulders to his waist like an ancient samurai. A dark cloth mask concealed the lower half of his face beneath a rounded helmet with broad side flaps, leaving only sharp, watchful eyes visible. Thick rope bindings, reinforced forearm guards, and a wide crimson sash completed the outfit, while a curved sword rested at his hip. He placed a small diary on his lap and held a pen, hovering just over the plain sheet. Ken blinked, then began to write. "It's been 2 days since we came here. Ruination dungeons have been different from the norm, but this one is on another level. It feels like we stepped into another world, not just filled with monsters but with people, humans, possibly." Ken paused, then continued. "In these past 2 days, we haven't seen one beast, just antelopes roaming the wild, but we have seen villages burned to the ground, people bound to stakes and burnt. What could have caused this? We searched but haven't discovered the cause. I have counted 60 people bound to stakes and burnt, probably while alive. I don't think it's a coincidence that we've only seen 60 bound to stakes, and our number is also 60. His eyes narrowed. "Something might happen tonight. Our company might be attacked. Ken closed the diary and exhaled. First time seeing Ken in person. Doesn't look as fearsome as they said he was. An agent whispered to another as they stood on both sides of a tree. You haven't seen his summon then. A samurai with a katana and a massive 3-meter-tall bow seated on a black 3-headed horse. The horse looks ill-fed, yet I've never seen anything move like it. The other agent chuckled as he turned to the first. Hope you're not the scared type. The first guy clicked his tongue. With what I've seen so far, it's impossible to terrify me. I hope so. Welcome back. You survived, the chief alchemist said, and Godfrey could feel the subtle relief and gladness in his tone. A little smile graced his lips as he sat down. Godfrey leaned forward, interlocking his fingers. I am back. You knew the dungeon wasn't going to be easy. None of them are. All the alchemists responded with a single accord. Then the chief alchemist continued. We've done a brief count, and at least 800,000 people in your world are already dead in less than 2 weeks since the ruination began. Godfrey squinted. A painful number indeed. The unfortunate thing is I can't save everyone, and even if I do, not everyone will appreciate it. He paused, then sighed. Even if they don't, at least Earth will live on with its civilization. Will you face the next? The chief alchemist probed. Godfrey responded with a nod. Definitely. I just don't know when the gate will open. I only know of the plague that will come. He lowered his head, staring at the hardwood. I don't think people infected with the plague can be healed. There were things like centipedes moving underneath their skins. His eyes narrowed in sheer horror of what he witnessed in that vision. I just know the boss of that dungeon has to be killed before then, or whatever will happen after that will be catastrophic. Hopefully, the Japanese government sees a reason to call us. If they don't, we'll still make sure the dungeon is closed. Unfortunately, we might have to curtail damages that have sprung up in our absence. My king! The chief alchemist lifted his head slightly, revealing his beard. You do know this dungeon must be taken with care, or you might not return in one piece. A piece will always be taken. I only have to ensure it's the lowest possible. Trust me, I hate weakness, but it gives me something to pursue. It keeps me at the edge. I speak boldly, I know that. Godfrey lowered his head until his hands almost covered his eyes. I'm afraid, but that doesn't mean I won't do it regardless, while looking bold, of course. The chief alchemist chuckled at that last line. Then I guess we should continue from where we stopped. Gladly. Well then, what do you want to know? I have the Black Order Knights now, and I also have this. Godfrey revealed 5 diamond cores and sent them telekinetically to the alchemists that had not received theirs. All I need is one more, and Abaddon's door will be unsealed. How will the others see him? They will follow their king's decision, without a shred of doubt. But I can make mistakes, Godfrey frowned. That will be your burden to bear, not theirs. If you wish to restore the order to the height of its power, then you have to restore the old knights. We can also take the power of which we gave to them and give it to another. That is the most dishonorable and the worst end for a knight, but at your command, it shall be done. It sounds like my word is no different from that of a god. You are one to this order. The unknown king is a being of unfathomable strength, skill, and power. He stands at the apex of all beings, and his word is beyond law. It is the way of life. These people either abandoned their old life or were given hope, thus leaving their wounded state to serve. They swore a binding oath. Some kept it, some broke it, but those who have kept or returned to it see the unknown king see you as a god. The chief alchemist entwined his fingers like Godfrey, then leaned forward. You seem to not have understood the full weight of this. When they met you weak, all they saw was an opportunity to restore you to their final throne. Their memories have also been altered such that no knight knows his or her name. All they know is that which you have given them. It fills the holes, making it seem that has always been their name. It's part of the system created by the mana tree. After a slow exhale, the chief alchemist continued. You don't have to feel bad, my king. You bear the burden, you bear centuries-old men and women with failures on your back. No side got away free. Power comes with a price. Sometimes it's hard to see until the day comes. I've made peace with all that comes with all I have. But what was the cost for you? Why did you let Apollyon continuously drift? Why not send the apostles? You hail them as the best of the best, even better than the generals. Godfrey's eyes almost bore holes through the chief alchemist's hood. It meant a lot when the mana tree decided to make us the mana system of the world. It usually uses concepts, like the summoning system of Earth that can't be seen, or giving spirit to a world. Those were the main two, but when it came to our world, it made men something that weren't gods. We're almost concepts, pillars of a world moving in flesh and bones. Then, my king, the chief alchemist lifted up one hand, his tone soft, forcing Godfrey to stop talking. The alchemist brought down his hood, revealing the face of an old, handsome man. His beard was an anchor beard that fell from his chin down, while the sides of his cheeks were clean. His hair was gray and white, and his irises had a bright golden shade. He snapped his fingers, and Godfrey found himself and the chief alchemist standing in a dark hall with rough, rocky walls. There was a short, wide staircase that descended into the main hall, which was covered with water. What caught Godfrey's attention more than the background were the golden trees glowing with bright golden light. There were 4 of them, 4 massive golden trees with massive branches. It almost seemed as if these trees were made of golden strands of light. Where am I? The chief alchemist turned his head to Godfrey. The grave of the apostles. Each tree was once an apostle like me. Godfrey's eyes went wide. Those trees are apostles. Godfrey found himself stuttering due to the shock. He still couldn't believe his ears. The grave young king is a teacher, and staring right at it, we saw our end if we acted. The order was stretched thin. We are the compass of our knights, they communicate with us. We are the reason their abilities work, their anchor. We created them, we maintained them, we strengthened them, but that had a cost. Mana. The chief alchemist looked at the trees with a soft smile. My name is Zon. Blessed by the dew of the mana tree, I set out on a journey, moving with visions as my direction. It wasn't long until I met others and we, average men, set out to transform our world. Zon smiled like he remembered those days. We had stopped being men. Every step didn't take stamina but mana. What ran our bodies wasn't stamina but mana. It was used on every single thing we did. He glanced at Godfrey from the corner of his right eye. You know, it's easy to make changes when there's an apocalypse and the world suddenly has to change. That's the easiest way to bring about a change. All that chaos is to disrupt the people just long enough for something new to be planted. But we had to bring that change. We could be seen as mad and get beheaded. We could die to wild beasts because despite possessing the ability to see into other worlds, to access knowledge, known and unknown, to peer into the minds of many, to understand the beast and the man, to learn, unlearn, and relearn, the sword of a man could still take our lives with ease. Zon exhaled. The concept of tears matters less to us. We were men, we were gods, and at the same time we were more than both. We were close to a being like the mana tree, a concept that supersedes gods. It was oddly comfortable being so unique, yet haunting knowing the burden on our shoulders. So, we forged a lie after gathering knowledge of what we believe the Patans will surely bow to. We made dreams and men told tales. The dream Apollyon had. That was an exception. We left it as something forged by the mind became what it believed. Then what killed those apostles? Godfrey asked. I stated that we did everything on mana. Well, once that mana runs out, there is no coming back from it. These 4 ran out of mana before we were able to create the apostles. We are like men on life support, and those apostles are the life support. The farther they are from us, the weaker they get and the more strained our connection is to their mana. Sending out an apostle meant sending out an alchemist. We were strained during the ruination. We had just made he who must not be named a general, the highest amongst their ranks in our hope to conquer the ruination. But it failed. Why? Godfrey probed. Because something else was added. He was elevated from a fortunate one to a higher status. I believed it was to create the ultimate vessel with the opportunity to achieve what the mana tree wanted, but it affected his mind, turning him against us. He was already weak and had just become a hybrid, yet we lost many that day even with the help of our great flag-bearer and healer. After that, we still had a world to protect. Our apostles had held a dome strong enough to keep that knight trapped for our knights to pin him down, and then we sealed him into a vault using a great amount of mana to ensure it would never be broken physically. We needed time to recover, but there were battles to fight. The toll of that battle took hold. Apollyon was the first to drift. Zahn glanced at Godfrey. She was the youngest, but by the time the ruination came, she was just over 200. We Pathans grow stronger and better as we age. Even in our late 300s, we are still strong, but once we've struck 400, we die. A strong man can age in just 1 year and meet his end. This means we are always at our prime until we cross the 400-year deadline. So Apollyon had become a woman, a great one, from a little girl to a well-respected general. When she drifted away, we knew the reason, and I couldn't find fault in her. Zahn faced Godfrey completely. There was no judgment, firstly because we were exhausted, but truthfully, they weren't at fault. We were, and so I and the rest of us realized the end of the order in Patan had come. We were just fighting an already lost war. 2 generals died, more left, but it was over before then. When the lies were revealed, it all shattered and the strongest force, a power we were proud of, collapsed in a span of months. Godfrey was silent, then after a while he spoke. It was the mana tree. What you said is no different from blaming the waves of the ocean for losing your child. It will do you no good. When Zahn said that, Godfrey's face hardened. How can you blame yourself for something you have no control over? We didn't blame ourselves. We only wept that this was our fate. It was unfair. Was it? Zahn smiled softly and slowly covered his head once more. The unknown king stands before me. The lies became real and the dead order is once more rising from its ashes. If that didn't happen, there might have never been you, your majesty. Zahn snapped his fingers, and they returned to the meeting hall. If the Golden Order didn't fall, then we would have never had a need for the real deal. You feel it's unfair, but you were born from that. Should that unfairness be directed toward you then? When Zahn saw Godfrey's face, he calmly added, "It can't. This will be tough, but cease your anger toward the mana tree. You feel attached because she conceived you, but she isn't a being you can direct hate toward. That is wasting your emotions on something that will never change and you also can never alter. Focus on the future. Yours is restoring order and ensuring your world doesn't fall into ruination. So, bring me another core and face the trial." A trial or a submission? Godfrey's eyes flickered. The being who will emerge from that trial won't be me. You are the unknown king. If your finger is found on the roadside, does that mean it's no longer your finger? Zahn leaned back. One final question. You said it's been 400 years since Patan fell and you also fought Cain. How is that possible? It's been a little over a century since Mana came. The chief alchemist nodded when Godfrey asked the question. There is a time balance to all worlds. A 1,000-year-old elf is no different from a 100-year-old human on Earth if they stay in their respective worlds. If the elf comes here, however, she or he will surely outlive you all by a large margin, and the man will live a very short life in the elven world. However, when a world fails at the ruination stage, it falls away from that timeline and begins a fast run in order to rebuild and restore another civilization. In other worlds, 400 years was just 40 years in Earth's timeline. Although now, our timelines have matched. So what about Patans? They were already over 200 years old before they became summons. What will happen to them once they hit 400? We work like the stars. We are the brightest at the end of our lives, but there is an end. Zon replied calmly. Right now, I can live for as long as my summons can. So that means I can live for 400 years. Some of your summons will all be dead before then. They are immortal for as long as they haven't reached 400, but once they get there, it is the end. Hearing this, Godfrey lowered his hand. So I have about 200 years or close to that. What about Toria, Lysander, Isolde? They have longer lifespans. They do, but Isolde isn't a Patan. You forget, your summon isn't here but the castle. She is simply tied to it like the rest of us, and the castle in its making as a summon has been granted a lifespan of 400 years, so you will get to that age. Will becoming a god change it? Why do you yearn to live forever in this world? Zon inquired. That question made Godfrey pause. I guess as a human, it's in our nature to avoid death. Isn't 400 years long enough? You've lived just 3 since you awakened the castle. I believe 400 is too long. Before a decade passes, you would have carved your name so deep into the annals of time that it will echo your very existence. Living long isn't the gain, Your Majesty. It's what you did while alive that matters. We all die, so my recommendation to you is this. Live like what you are, a king, and die as one. That's a hard pill to swallow, but I understand you. Godfrey rose to his feet. One more chord is then, my chief alchemist. The next time we meet might be the last. It shall be a new beginning, Your Majesty. Smiling, Godfrey turned, tucked his hands into his pockets and walked away. Wish me luck then. He vanished. An alchemist faced Zon. You've grown quite fond of him. You always had a soft spot for the young ones. He's a king, not a young king, another stated. Zon glanced at them from behind his hood. He wants to be close to us. He wants to learn. I can see that, and so can you. Revere him, but also understand that he is still young and is in need of guidance to lead a race. There was silence. He will become the unknown king after you receive the core, one of the alchemists said, then tilted his head toward Zon. We created that being with lies. How do we know exactly what it's like? It's like what we made him to be, an unfathomable and undeniably powerful being, a ruler, a king yearning to amass power and forge the throne for his imperial rule. Another replied. And who exactly can advise or stop a being like that? The alchemist that asked the first question asked another. There is no need to worry. In the end, the unknown king and the man we spoke to are no different. The only difference is one has the ability to be afraid and limited strength, and the other doesn't have the capacity to fear and possesses power created by our imagination. The era of the unknown king will come. It can only be stopped if our king decides he will hide until someone else clears the trial. Zon spoke up. Earth would be piling up with corpses before then, one responded. Zon looked at him, and for that reason alone he must clear the trial. One of them cleared his throat. Since that has been decided, what about the dragon mother? She and our king have decided to be together. Isn't it time we officiate a marriage and lift her from the rank of a general to a queen? Does she really need it? She is the mother of dragons, a status higher than any queen or empress. And she's also the wife of the king. She also has a place in our civilization. It's best if we speak to the blacksmith and forge something for a queen, another suggested. Zon lifted up his hand, and every other alchemist who wanted to speak stopped. We shall make something befitting a queen, a dragon, and a fighter. Then we shall create a new spear for her. But when are we going to tell her that she's almost like us, but blessed with the mana tree's new leaf? I do not think she should know that the reason for the mana tree's questions is what made her special. An alchemist sitting by Zon's right shook his head slowly. We should focus on preparing the ceremony and hope that not only do they pass the ruination stage, but the king regains himself after the era of the unknown king. Well then, Zon stretched his hand to the alchemist sitting farthest from him. Shall we continue? We have good knowledge about this world called Earth. Their technology is unique, but beyond that detail, I do find this world's favored ones to be quite special. The mana tree surpassed what it had done in the past. Cain and Adam, a destroyer of worlds and a ruler of one. The alchemist's low tone fell into their ears. What fascinates me is, our king seems to be both. The end seems to have been predetermined since the beginning. Zon grunted. There are parallel ends and neither looks kind. They're all trying to break control, yet all of them are more perfect in control. In fact, the common man has more control over himself than these three. What is the mana tree planning? There was silence, then Zon spoke grimly. It's bringing the end to all life. If life can't fulfill its goals, it will end it all and let something new come. Earth is the last chosen world. No wonder I have never seen such madness in any other world, and the ruination seems to be the entry into the actual plot. The next morning, as the agents woke up and began to pack, Takshi picked up his sniper rifle and looked through the scope, where he saw Ken still sitting on the tree branch. Weirdo, Takshi snorted, only for Akiro to hit his back with one hand. Stop picking on the kid, he's here to help. Hinata sat on the back of her chimeric antelope beast, waiting for everyone to prepare so they could continue the journey. Their tracker was taking them to where the highest source of mana was, meaning the exact spot the boss would be. While everyone brought down the camps, Ken was quite confused. He was certain they would be attacked and had stayed up all night, expecting the boss or any beast at all, but there was nothing. Still confused, he sat on a truck, and they began to move. All the other trucks followed the lead of the first one. And the first one followed a seeker bird. As they moved, Ken, who sat cross-legged, gently caressed his sheathed katana. What sort of creature were they facing? Ken pondered as he scanned his environment, but there was no attack, only common wild beasts fleeing at the sound of their vehicles. His eyes, however, widened to the limit when they rode down a narrow road beside vast farmlands that had been burnt to the ground. Everywhere until the horizon was covered with ash and black soot. Ken stood up, clenching his katana tightly as he stared at the town the convoy was driving into. This wasn't a village anymore but a large town, yet all that was left of it were burnt houses and huge fallen trees, also burnt until they were darker than the night. All the trucks stopped at the heart of the town. There, they saw people tied to stakes. They were tied in a circle, about 20 people, and burnt. It should have been a horrid sight, enough to question the sanity and culture of the people who lived in this town that looked like an ancient Japanese settlement. But no one could even think in that direction when they saw the creatures in these people's bodies. Centipedes. Some of them had huge centipedes stuck to their bodies. Some had smaller ones, but sometimes more than 6. All the centipedes had died with their hosts, burnt to death. Although Ken's face was hidden, the skin around his eyes was pale. He was appalled at what his eyes had witnessed. Akiro glanced at Ken, who walked past them. His eyes lingered on Ken for a while before his attention came back to the burnt people. Is it some kind of centipede infestation? Hinata squinted, then turned to Akiro. Whatever it is, we have to kill the source. Takshi, who sat atop the second truck, said grimly. As much as I hate to admit it that Godfrey might be right, but we won't let whatever is causing this get to Japan. It will die here, even if we die with it. While the main group were conversing, Ken arrived before a massive tree that had fallen because of the fire. This time around, he saw more bodies just after the tree. It was like they were fleeing from the town, but something happened. Someone killed them, even all the way beyond a small creek. Over 100 bodies were here. Ken scanned the bodies and discovered they were killed with darts, poisoned darts. A good number of these people had dead centipedes beneath their flesh. It was a grotesque sight. A portal opened up beside Ken, and a man on a black three-headed horse with a silver mane and tail stepped out. This man wore traditional armor, designed for an honorable samurai clan head. A ferocious mask hid the samurai's face, while there was a massive 3-meter-long bow strapped to his back. 2 weapons. A katana was strapped to the waist of this 8-foot-tall samurai. Compared to most summons at the titled god tier, this samurai was really small, but astride his 8-foot-tall warhorse, he could exceed 10 feet. Asahi, Ken muttered. He gave his summon his father's name. What do you think? Asahi dismounted, then squatted. They've been dead for quite a while. I have this odd feeling that whatever we're chasing after is heading for the gate. Ken clenched his fist. It's already in Tokyo. These bodies have been dead much longer than those we met on our way. It was heading in the direction of the gate. No, Asahi shook his head, then looked ahead. The monster behind this is still in this dungeon. It's the plague that is creeping towards the gate. Ken turned and stormed back to the group. It's heading for the gate. We need to go back. What do you mean? If this is the plague, there is no host to take it back to Tokyo. Ikiro responded calmly. You forgot we put pins in every village we pass. Why did we do that? Because of the research and extraction team. They're in here right now, and any of them could be stepping through that gate as we speak. All of them looked at each other, uncertain of which direction to take. Going back could be a big mistake, and going forward might also be a costly mistake. At that moment, the sound of a bamboo flute, carried by the gentle breeze, reached their ears. What's that? Hinata muttered while the entire team looked around, their summons and weapons at the ready. Suddenly, a female agent fell to her knees and began to cough blood. A comrade close to her rushed to her and quickly removed her helmet and the mask that covered the lower part of her face, only for him to see a small centipede crawling beneath the flesh of her cheek. His eyes trembled. He remembered seeing her scratching a lot when they were in the truck, and it wasn't only her. Sounds of coughing rang out as 27 other agents fell, some spasming as blood came out of their orifices. Don't touch them, Ken bellowed, but some concerned agents were simply too close. Some who looked like they were dying 1 moment ago suddenly grabbed their comrades, vomiting small centipedes on them. Screams exploded as their ranks fell into chaos. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story. And if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down. Our target is to get 1K subscriber. There will be SUPRISC for all of you. Stay tuned.